You may see me vanish from time to time. No offense intended.
So, and I just sent out a corrected agenda with the correct start times. And Bill Owen is asked to squeeze a discussion about the PRR pump station before the budget presentation. So that change is made to that most recent agenda.
Great, thank you, Wendy. With that in mind, maybe we'll get going. Let me just look at my screen here. It looks like we've got a quorum and we've got everyone here, but I'll go ahead and do roll call. Just a reminder that we have an audio and I think video recording. And I'll go ahead and go through the roll call for the April 12th, 2022 Penn 1 Board of Supervisors meeting. Do roll call vote. Claudio Campuzano. Here. Annalisa Kohler.
Here.
PJ Christopher. I saw PJ on the call.
Oh, I muted, unmuted.
Oh, there you are.
I'm unmuted and present.
Great, thank you. I'm having trouble with the Hollywood squares here. And Jeff Noodleman.
Here.
Great, thanks, folks. We'll move on to item B, public testimony. Do we have any public testimony today?
I don't believe so.
And let's move on to item C, PR pump station. Bill.
Good afternoon, all. Bill Owen, Chief Engineer. I've asked that this agenda item be added partly to follow up on the board's conversation last month on this topic and your interest to table it temporarily to this month when we had a full quorum. Just as a quick reminder, particularly for those who weren't present last month, we had two topics that dealt with the PIR pump station. The topic regarding ownership of the pump station was addressed last month when the board agreed to direct staff to begin negotiation with the city of Portland on possible ownership for Penn 1's long-term ownership of the pump station. So that was addressed. The second item was the one that's focused on for this particular agenda item, and it regards the proposal to temporarily halt the pump station structural rehab project. And that proposal staff made was due in part to potentially reduce unnecessarily costs and expenses on a project that may not be needed if the FEMA grant application is awarded. And we will know about the FEMA grant application in early to midsummer of this year. And staff's understanding of the project and timeline suggests that we have some time to stop design now. It's at 30% design, and it's a common place to take a breath for projects and say, is this really what we want to do, or is there any changes to it? If we do not get the grant, the FEMA grants, and we can't replace the pump station, this is definitely something we want to do. And restarting the project to finish design and get into bid and advertisement and construction can still happen if we stop now and start it up again in summer. So, but if the grant is awarded, our position is that this project is not necessary, and we can halt this project, start up the replacement project under that timeline when the grant's awarded, and shift gears towards that replacement project. So Yeah, so wanted to have the board hear that assessment of staff and ask whether or not they feel comfortable about temporarily halting that project in its design phase, knowing that there's still a good chance that we can construct it if the grant's not awarded in the summer of 2023.
Looks like PJ has a question.
So Bill, that makes sense to me, but do we have any idea on if we get the grant? I mean, that's a federal grant. How much longer out does the project get kicked before we can actually get the money and spend the money to make the change that we need to make?
Yeah.
So are we, do we have any idea on that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'm gonna let you, James or Liz, Edgar, provide a response there. They're more informed on that.
And PJ, we didn't meet last week. I'm Liz Edgar, and I will be serving as the project manager for the pump station replacement, and I've been acting as the project manager for the structural upgrades. I'm an engineer with the district, and I'm focusing on capital projects here for primarily internal drainage. Like Bill said, we're hoping to hear back about the grant probably late summer or so, and then it'll take about a year to get all of the agreements in place and get design going. We have a couple of years of design, and then construction is going to take several years as well. So to your point, it is kind of a long process. We are anticipating that we can get through all of this in about 5 years, 6 years. We're hoping to be able to turn the station on in 27, 28. And that is with some pretty healthy contingency built in there as well, just based upon the fact that we are dealing with the federal government, based upon the current climate that we're in. You know, we don't really know what's going to be happening with the shipping and manufacturing world. So we did build some allowances in there for unforeseen schedule delays, knowing that that could be a potential. And within that time frame, we're hoping to have the station live 5 to 6 years from now.
And sorry for the ignorance, if I should know this, but say we just stay the course now, when would the pump station be completed?
The structural upgrades for the existing station would be completed hopefully next summer in the in-water work window. If we face delays in bidding or getting a contractor on board, it could be the in-water work window of 2023. The project that is being proposed right now is only to reinforce the building from gravity loads. So this would only stop the pump station from falling downwards. Essentially, it's not any sort of mechanical upgrade. It doesn't bring the station up to code, so it likely wouldn't be able to withstand a large seismic event or even potentially a very large wind event. The upgrades are strictly to prevent settling.
So it's a Band-Aid to allow us the pump station to keep operating. And to answer your question, we'd have to find alternative funding sources to replace the pump station if the FEMA grant's not awarded. And yeah, there may be some options there, but that would take several years to pan out. And we would need to have more conversation with you about that.
Thank you.
You know, and one way to think about it, and please jump in, Liz and Bill, if I'm mischaracterizing this, is that because this is a stormwater pump station, BES is funding the structural, or would be funding the structural repairs. We are funding them to date. And really, this isn't, I don't think this is BES driving the discussion, nor is it necessarily MCDD staff driving the discussion. I think it's a collective decision to pause and to take, what amounts to maybe $325,000 required to stabilize the structure, rather than do that, to maybe hold that money in reserve. Perhaps this hasn't been approved yet, but perhaps in emergency contingency to do emergency pumping should the structure fail. The effort, the financial effort, and the staffing, contracting, construction effort to do this pump station rehabilitation, the structural rehab, is not insignificant. It's complicated. And so what we're saying is we feel we're taking a calculated risk to put our focus on getting the pump station replacement done, holding money in reserve, while holding money in reserve and not spending the time and money to build something that's not entirely simple. And then we're gonna have to remove that in 5 or 6 years to build a new one. Not to build a new one, but to just remove it. So decommission it. So
Right, I just
is
remember.
that right?
No, sorry.
Is that a long-winded way of saying kind of what we're trying to do here?
That works great. Thanks, James.
Bill, hi, this is Jeff. How much, so you said about, we're at about 30% so far, rough. So how much is that dollar-wise has been spent to date? What does that represent?
At this phase of closeout, we will have spent about $95,000.
Okay. So depending, and there's a lot of ifs and whens and contingent, I get that. So if we stop it and then start again, more likely than not, it's not going to start it. There's going to have to be some time expended to get them back up to speed, so to speak. So this is not just pick up at 95 and go forward, I'm assuming, correct?
So normally that would be the case, that we wouldn't be able to just cleanly start where we had left off. The engineer who is working on this project does know that it's a very good potential that we are wanting the right to reserve to pick back up. And it is one structural engineer who has been focused on it primarily. And so as much as it isn't, we will lose some time. We'll have to get a new contract task order signed for the next phase of work, and he'll have to review all of his calculations. But it isn't going back and starting from scratch or rebidding the project. It will be easier than that. It's like dusting off a book that you started reading a couple of months ago and sat down, and it's mostly still there.
So it's basically the same project team, and we have the procurement tools set up to start pretty quickly if and when we decide to go that option.
All right. So barring a change, significant change in scope and focus and plans and specs, the 95 spent is not wasted. We can just build from that.
Correct.
Okay, that's fine. Great. Thank you.
Claudio?
Yeah, no, I just want to say for the record, thanks to staff for bearing with us and bringing this back a second time in a row. Really, I think it's a big enough issue that we really wanted to make sure that we got the whole board together to make the decision together. But just for the record, I know that the folks that were here last time around had a pretty robust discussion. So I just wanted to let folks know that I'm pretty comfortable with the direction on this. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Claudio. I guess just one comment is, should we assume that we're not voting today, are we giving kind of consensus? That's my first question. The second is, would we have if we have a summer board meeting, say July or August, and we know the fate of the pump station replacement grant, is our next touch point on this issue saying, for example, we have the grant, we're going to continue to pause on the structural rehab, and we're going to be looking to have contingency money in place should the existing pump station fail. Is that kind of our game plan?
It is. So the next touch point would be this summer, once we know the fate of the grants, and staff will come to you with a recommendation on how to proceed, whether to restart the project or to move forward with a potential contingency plan to fund emergency pumping.
Yeah, and I think I did hear you say that they weren't looking for a vote, James. My understanding is that that staff are looking for a vote to delay. We were looking for that motion last time around, and sort of punted that to when we had the whole band back together.
Great, thank you, Claudia. So, Bill, should we do a vote for the record? Is that?
Yes, and Wendy has provided a motion in the chat, if that's agreeable to you.
Great. Do we have a motion?
Before we go there, Jeff, I know that you had some original questions from last time around regarding the motion and had some tweaks to it. I don't remember what they are, so my apologies, but I just wanted to make sure that this captured your concerns.
I'd have to go back and look at it. I don't remember. So, I mean, thank you, Wendy, for doing this. First of all, always on top of stuff and anticipating our needs. But what, to Claudia's point, is this similar, or help me out here? I have today's stuff packet right here on my other screen. I'm lucky enough to have two screens. So I have today's agenda and packet, but what was that previous motion something different, or go ahead?
So the materials weren't included in this packet. So that was a last minute change. So my apologies, it would have been in your April packet. So that's why I put it in the chat.
So, and the text in this chat is a copy and paste or paraphrase from the meeting summary from your March meeting.
Got it.
Would someone like to make a motion?
So I'll move to delay the design of the Portland International Raceway pump station structural updates until the award status of the FEMA replacement grant is known.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Claudio. Thank you, Jeff. Do a roll call vote, starting with Claudio.
Aye.
PJ Christopher. And Lisa Kohler.
Aye.
And Jeff Noodleman.
Aye.
And James Allison votes aye. The motion passes unanimously. And
Thank you.
we're at 1:20. We are right on time, and that was a lot of discussion. Thank you, folks. Appreciate it, board and staff.
I would just say I really appreciate the board putting the brakes on this till y'all were here. I think it was just really kind of reflective of a culture we ought to work on, or work towards. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Item D, presentation of proposed budget. Ben?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your time today. I do have the proposed budget for you. Can everybody see my screen okay? All right.
Yes.
Thanks, James. So in your packet, you have a budget summary and also a detail sheet. What I have for you today are highlights of 5 to 6 budget dynamics that I wanted to bring your attention to and have us focus on. And when we look at what we want to cover today, so it's only going to be about 12 slides or so. When we look at what we want to cover today.
Just Annalisa just put something in. This is the Pen 1 budget presentation, not the Pen 2. I think the title said Pen 2. Ben, I know there are a lot of budget presentations happening concurrently, so make sure you have the right one. Thank you, Annalisa.
Really interesting. Thank you, Annalise. Yes.
We'll take their revenue though, if you. wanna give
Yeah,
it to-
you'll take that revenue.
You guys are looking pretty good for Pen 1. You'll see.
I do apologize. I thought I had to actually close this Pen 2 one because we're done with that one. So my apologies. It'll only be a moment here.
I will share that it's been an exciting learning opportunity for many of us who are new to employment for this budget cycle. So we've learned a lot about how things actually work.
Just one more second. And just so people don't feel bad, you're still going to get the same picture, just with different words.
I think I told you guys last time you were my favorite board, so we're just going to ask you to approve all the other boards' budgets too. We think it's really more efficient that way, but I don't know how the other boards will feel about it.
Yeah,
You know, Jim, these are recorded, so we could go back and play all the other districts. Just make sure you haven't been saying that to all the districts.
Going to get found out.
yeah. Okay, starting again. Today we're going to talk about the budget summary, what this budget will fund, what a balanced budget looks like, reserves, and then we're going to talk about more traditional walkthrough of the budget, resources, expenditure, our capital program, and next steps. So what we have for you today, when we look at Pen 1, instead of a $3.6 million, we're looking at $2.6 million for Pen 1. The big story here with Pen 1 for next year is your capital program. You can see on the resources side, under contracts and other resources or revenues coming into the district, there's over $2 million coming into the district to fund the capital program. And you'll see that as we walk through this. And you'll see that your capital program is over 70% of your total requirements. Outside of the capital program, there isn't much increase or changes in our operating expenditures, but we will walk through it. And please feel free to raise your hand and ask questions. I'm happy to pause and answer questions and provide clarification, whatever we need. And you'll also notice that almost all of my numbers are rounded. So in your budget detail, you might notice just unrounded numbers, more specific numbers. But for the sake of this presentation, they're all rounded to the nearest thousand or so. So when we talk about a balanced budget, our total revenue is coming in at just under $2.5 million. And that excludes our beginning fund resources. And our expenditure total is $2.3 million. That also excludes our ending fund balance. So our net for our revenue and expenditures is $193,000. And this $193,000 represents contributions from our partner jurisdictions to the, if I'm not mistaken, the PIR pump station project. And so hopefully I'm getting that right. Maybe it's the PMLS project. So Port of Portland and Metro are contributing 2 years worth of contributions towards that project, and we will hold this amount in reserve for the second year of the PMLS project. So that's the dynamic there. Okay. When we look at reserves, in Pen 1, unfortunately, we do not have any budgeted resources for undesignated reserves. The capital reserves I just touched on briefly is the $193,000 that we will hold from our partner jurisdictions for the PMLS project. Our operating reserve does not change from year to year. It's $90,000 in the current year, and it's forecasted to remain at $90,000 for the next year. And then we have our restricted balances for the DEQ projects and the IFA loan reserve, and those are also unchanged from the prior year, for a grand total of $300,000 in reserves. Again, this is forecasted for the ending fund balances for fiscal year 22-23. When we look at the Penn 1 budget, what this will fund is our core mission maintenance activities, also the Bureau of Environmental Sciences, stormwater IGA tasks that we have with the City of Portland, and a robust capital program. When we look at assessment, now we're transitioning into revenues, resources, and expenditures. When we look at our assessments for next year, they're forecasted at about $310,000. That's 12% of our total revenues. And I just wanted to point out a few things. When we look at the property owners across the district, the compression that each property owner experiences is widely varies across the board from 0 to 91%. When we look at the current year's assessments, we have a compression loss of approximately 57%. For next year, we're proposing an approximate 9% increase. However, we expect to realize much less than that due to compression. So we may have some opportunity to come back to you on this. We're proposing a 9% increase across all 4 districts, which is the same for Penn 1, but again, in your budget, it shows a net increase of like 2 to 3% because of that compression loss. So when we look at service contracts and other revenue, these are the 2 big categories. So we're still on resources. So these are still revenues. When we look at service contracts, that $1 million in service contracts represents the BES stormwater IGA that we have for Penn 1. Those are the specific tasks that Penn 1 completes on behalf of BES. We also have the City of Portland General Fund contribution. For next year, that's budgeted at $196,500 to backfill that compression loss to prop up the operations for Penn 1. And then we also, in this category under service contracts, we have the Portland International Raceway pump station that we just talked about, and also the PMLS contributions from partner jurisdictions. So those contributions from our partner jurisdictions on those projects are going into service contracts, but the grant portions for those 2 projects are going into the other revenue category. And I know that can be confusing, and so I have separate slides on each of those projects specifically to go into a little bit more detail for those projects. So the other revenue, that's the second category there, an additional $1.1 million. That represents the state levy grants for the PMLS project. That's $428,000. And then also we have budgeted approximately $680,000, almost $690,000 in FEMA grants for the PIR pump station. We might hear a resolution on if we're awarded those grant funds in the current, in next fiscal year, but we might not hear a final resolution to that in next fiscal year. But we wanted to budget for those grant funds next year so that we are prepared to receive that revenue and also spend on that pump station replacement. And then the balance of that other revenue is just some miscellaneous other revenues that are insignificant. So I have 2 more slides here. One is for the PIR pump station. The other one is for the PMLS project. So just to recap what we just discussed, this project is budgeted in Pen 1 for next year at $971,000. However, this project will only proceed if the federal grant is awarded. So we have the federal grant dollars. We also have contributions to this project specifically for the city of Portland. We have this $220,000. That's a placeholder. I understand that we have some more conversations in this month and next that could change that figure. That could go up or down depending on those subsequent conversations. And then the city of Portland portion that you see here, that's $220,000, will only be requested if the project proceeds, if we receive those grant dollars. So just wanted to provide that clarification.
I just want to point out that the GF does not stand for gluten-free funding. It stands for general fund, which is the hardest money to get from the city. So we appreciate the support from our colleagues at the city of Portland in helping with the project.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. That's a good point. General fund. And here's another GF. So this is the PMLS project, the Portland Metro Levy System. This is the core project, also known as PED, pre-engineering and design. So the project costs for each of the 4 districts next year is proposed to be equal, 535. So you'll see that in each of the districts. And then here's additional contributions going towards that project. We talked about the state levy grants, the $428,000, the city of Portland GF general fund, $200,000. Again, that value, depending on our subsequent conversations this month and next, may change. But we also have the Port of Portland and the Metro contributions at $50,000 each. Those jurisdictions chose to submit their 2-year contributions at one time. So these contributions represent their total contributions over the next 2 years towards this project. That creates more revenue than expenditures that we have for next year. So that's why I was saying that the $193,000 in excess revenue will be held over in designated reserves, capital reserves for project expenditures in 2023-24. I will pause there. I know that was a lot of talking. Any questions, clarification needed to this point?
No questions on my part. I do want to recognize Annalisa at Metro and PJ at the Port. And obviously Claudio for all of the understanding of the city budget process to get these extra contributions to meet the PMLS. Fantastic work, folks. In addition to the staff coordinating all this.
I agree. Thank you, Jane. Next, we're going to look at a summary of materials and services in Pen 1. So there's 2 categories of materials and services. We're moving on to expenditures now that I'm going to highlight. The projects and planning, I'm going to talk about a little bit in detail, and also the contracts category, I'm going to talk about just a little bit in detail. The rest of these items, I'm not going to go into much detail on. A lot of these things are status quo, or not much change over the prior year budget. One thing I want to highlight is the outside counsel increase. You'll see this increase in all of the district budgets. The outside counsel resides in professional services, this $100,000. For this number, the $48,000 represents an increase in budget over the prior year. And this is in preparation for any dissolution proceedings, anything that we need to ask outside counsel for each of the districts. If the urban district is not moving towards a June 2023 goal for implementation, this will most likely not be expended. So we could see this as a budget savings opportunity. This would just be carried over to the subsequent year if we do not go forward with the June 2023.
Ben,
stand-up
this Jeff.
area.
So is 48K is what is budgeted, or is it an increase of 48K?
Good question. It's an increase of 48K over the
So
prior year.
what's the prior year budget?
Let me look that up for you. It'll be on my other screen. It will
Okay,
be,
thanks.
yeah, it will be in your packet, but I can get to it fairly quickly here. And it'll just take me a second.
Jeff, I'll just address in advance, because likely this is where your question is going, why? The dissolution provision in under ORS 550 requires that there will be a debt distribution plan negotiation between the urban district and the respective legacy district. And I am adding this in just in case there is a need for the Penn 1 to retain its independent counsel to represent you on that. We are hopeful that we can come up with an administrative process where all districts won't have any dispute over that. But if there is, we would want to, this is just a measure, a contingency built into that, so yet you can retain your own counsel to advise you through that process.
And then while Ben is looking for the prior year number, I want to share that the challenge and complexity of actually collecting revenues for the urban district is likely to push us into 2024 to move forward with the solution. We've had some good conversations with other local utilities who may be able to help with collection, but developing the technical details and the intergovernmental agreements and all that to make that all happen is likely to take longer, particularly when combined with the urban board still working on developing its cost profiles. So I think it's unlikely this fiscal year, but probably some expenditure in the following fiscal year. I'm sorry to jump in front of you, James.
No problem, Jim. Clarification. So Ben put in the chat that the legal budget for 23 is 58. Does that mean, so our total is 58 for the coming fiscal year, which would mean that for the prior year, it was 10,000. Is that, am I reading that correctly? Okay.
Yep, that is correct. The current year is $10,000. Next year is 58,000.
Great, thank you. And then I have a question. I hope it's not too, I hope it doesn't require too lengthy a response, but for the total M&S increase of 10%, is that for a known increase in level of service or activities, or is that more inflationary based? That's one question. And I guess that's tied to a second question, which is for a 9% increase in assessments, is that, and I know it's across all districts, what's the context for that? Is that context inflation or planning for inflation? How does that relate to prior years? In other words, did we hold assessment increases quite low in the last few years, and so we're making up for that in some way? Which, and I'm not saying that's a problem. We do that at the city in terms of rate increases on certain types of contracts. So just trying to understand the cost, the materials and services cost increase, and the assessment cost increase.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple answers, and then I'll let Jim weigh in on your last question. So I'll take them in opposite order. So when we look at the assessment increase in Penn 1, where we are proposing a 9% rate increase, but we expect to actually yield about a 2 to 3% increase, that's about $8,000 to $9,000 in actual increase in dollars. And then back to your materials and services. So the total materials and services increase in budget over the prior year is $45,000. And so with that legal increase of $48,000, you can see that the rest of materials and services is actually reducing over the prior year. Another dynamic to what you alluded to, James, is our personnel services and our increasing 9%, if I'm not mistaken. So, and then also the district is not immune to the inflation that all jurisdictions are experiencing. However, I do have to say that in several of our contracts, we're constrained by the IGA language and the contract language. So we're not able to increase our revenues or our contract revenues as quickly as we're experiencing that inflation. And then I'll let Jim respond to the across the board 9% and why that is with the assessments.
Ben or Keith, feel free to jump in. All the districts are contributing. If you are imposing that 9% across the board on all the districts, it generates, Ben, help me out, $500,000 or so. And our staffing costs alone with PERS, healthcare, and plan step increases more than absorb that. And so then when you throw inflation on, we don't really have other options. We can reduce program. We're pretty thin on the operating side, particularly with the new district work on top of it. We are talking to the urban district initially now about increasing the cost share from the urban for staffing from MCDD. That may become a model of some proposed efficiency improvements that we may be proposing to the rest of the legacy boards who are contracting with MCDD right now as well. But at the end of the day, we either need to tap into reserves, cut program, or go with this rate of increase. Did I cover it, Ben?
Yeah, I think there was only one aspect. We proposed a 9%, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Jim or Keith. We didn't want to go, we received direction or suggestion from the boards in the past that we wouldn't be comfortable going over that. So that's why we were proposing a 9% and not more.
One of the other cost drivers, and Ben, you may have mentioned this too, is the increase in our security costs, both for campus and a few of our sites. But the impact to Penn One would be your share of the services that we have in place now to protect the campus from being broken into. We are working on potential partnerships with some of our neighbors, and we're working on some capital investments and improved alarms and video cameras and so on that we hope will ultimately reduce those current contracted security costs, but they're pretty significant right now.
Great, thank you. Those answers completely satisfy my question, and I appreciate the level of detail. Thank you.
You may see some of your fellow districts discussing whether or not to tap into their reserves are not possible for Penn One. So you may see, for example, SDIC choosing to reduce the rate of increase and tapping into what for them are pretty healthy reserves. I think the only other board that might consider that would be Penn Two. We met with them earlier today. It did not come up as a topic of conversation, but I could see them imagining it. At the end of the day, though, even if you reduce the % increase in the assessment, as you can see, the $8,000 figure for Penn, it doesn't necessarily materially affect folks. I do want to acknowledge that the private property owners in Penn One are more greatly impacted because of the effects of compression. So I want to acknowledge you, Jeff.
Thanks, James. Good questions. And Jim. Still on the expense side. So these numbers are also included in your materials and services. The JCA contribution is up 5%. That's across the board. So each contributor to the JCA, as agreed upon by the IGA, is going up 5%. That's the budget number. And then MCDD admin that Jen touched upon is up $21,000 or 15%. That MCDD admin expenditure forecast is based upon the capital and non-capital projects that we have budgeted for to complete for Penn One in fiscal year 2022-23. So that's where that number comes from.
And just to clarify, we will be billing that on a time and materials basis, so it could be different than that number, but that's the budget that we've estimated would be required to implement the capital program as defined by the board.
That's exactly right. This is a summary of our non-capital projects. A majority of these are just Penn 1's portion of agency-wide projects. So you'll see this almost identical list for each of the districts. This is a decrease over the prior year by $15,000 and 15%. So I'll just highlight a few items on here. We have the emergency operations plan to build a more robust plan for the internal drainage portion of our drainage plan. And then we also have the Houseless coordination, and I believe Aster's up next after me for a presentation on that program. That the Houseless coordination number also includes some of our security measures associated with that program, which I think we'll hear more about.
I do want to be clear that we don't believe the security costs are being driven by the houseless population. They're being driven by criminals, which are often very separate things. So just want to make sure we know that.
Really good point.
Can I ask before you move on, and maybe I misheard you, you said most, maybe all, but most are pretty identical for all the different districts. Is there any secret sauce that goes into making variations of some of these line items per district based on, size or actual activity? And Jim's comment was spot on. I mean, just because one district has a propensity to attract more houseless folks, in no way means that there's additional security issues. But as far as certain other things, when do you just make a sharper pencil as to, well, Penn 2 or Sandy, require much more. So Penn 1, that number should go down a little bit.
Yeah, we and Aster, you may want to address this more specifically, but it's not a flat split. So we do track the number of sites that require cleanups or the type of outreach. We do have Michael Phelps, I see, is here from Cascadia Behavioral Health. So again, we're splitting up those costs based on usage. And what you would see if you looked across all of the districts is that MCDD bears the largest share of those expenditures because it has the most activity. You guys do have some activity around Schmear Road and so on, but it's based on usage as best we can predict that.
Yeah, and I'll just add a little bit to that. So for Penn 1, that number includes Cascadia Behavioral Health Outreach. It also includes a little bit of budgeting in case there is an illegal dumping incident that we need to clean up. So that would be through our contract with Rapid Response. And it also includes a little bit to install signage in Penn 1, but does not include any of the armed security, which we think at this point that expense is isolated to MCDD because that's where the highest risk areas are. That line item also includes ecology block placement in case we need to secure access to any of our sites in Penn 1.
I do think Penn 1's paying a bit of the share of the campus security costs, but Ben, you might be able to confirm that. But certainly you're not paying for the pump station for escorts that we're using for the crew now.
Right. When in my comment before, I was unsuccessfully, what I was trying to convey is that when we look at houseless coordination and our security, to more easily manage those efforts in a coordinated effort, we wanted to manage them in a single line item, and like what Jim was saying, not that one is a causation of the other. We just wanted to coordinate all of the needed efforts to accomplish the goals of the program in a single line item. So that's
a reflection of who's working on it
right
than anything else.
Exactly. And I'm sorry, getting back to your question, Jim. Yes, there is some share of security costs across the 4 districts. Okay, good questions. Anything else before we move on? Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is our capital program. And we talked about the 2 big ticket items on here, the PIR pump station at 971 and the PMLS project. One thing that we have not talked about yet is the PIR pump station structural upgrade. And we wanted to include this in the budget next year, even though the board just voted to pause this project. If that federal grant is not awarded, we wanted to have the appropriation available to proceed with that project if the grant is not awarded. So it's still in the budget. It doesn't necessarily have a lot of resources dedicated to it other than these expenditures in the capital program. The balance of the capital program includes the OSHA fall protection efforts that have been going on for a couple of years now, and then also the SCADA system upgrades. Okay, at the end of the fiscal year next year, we are forecasting a 0 undesignated reserve, 193,000 in capital reserve, as we discussed, $90,000 in operating reserve, less than bare minimum, and then restricted balances of 6,000 and 17,000 as discussed, for a grand total of 300,000. This slide represents a summary of the Penn 1 budget. I included it here just as a placeholder to offer any questions or clarification that we wanted to provide regarding the Penn 1 budget before we close.
Don't feel too rich, even though your budget's gone up 149%. It's illusory.
Yeah, in prior years, you can see in 2020, it was right around $600,000, and we're going up to 2.6. Cause to celebrate, a $1.7 million capital program. You can be proud of that. Okay, next steps, we are scheduled to meet back here again May 10th and approve the budget. If there's anything that we need to do, question, clarification, more deliberation, we're happy to provide that in between now and then. Appreciate your time.
Great, thank you, Ben, and thank you, Keith. I want to reiterate my appreciation for the board. From the assessments to the special requests, a great job to the board and to the staff for giving us a good budget so that we can fulfill our obligations. I want to also say that, you know, all presentations we get from the staff are always good. They say never say always or never, but I think I can always say that the staff do a great job with presentations. That includes past budget presentations. But Ben, I just want to compliment you and Keith. The presentation is more clear than it's ever been. The summary slides, and I'm just so impressed with how quickly you've come to understand the work through the financial lens. So I'm very much appreciated with where we're at this point. Nice job.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Okay, let's move on to item E, Houseless coordination update with Aster.
Hi, my name's Aster Moulton, Public Affairs and Community Relations Specialist, and part of what I do is manage our response to houseless activity and illegal dumping within the drainage districts. Presenting with me is Randy, our Operations Manager, and Michael Phelps with Cascadia Behavioral Health Care. Randy and Michael, would you like to introduce yourselves? Maybe starting with Randy.
All right. Well, if you haven't met me, I'm Randy Lyons. I'm the operations manager. So I'm just here to support all things ops and be a liaison between the admin world and field world. So thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm Michael. I'm a program supervisor with Cascadia's street outreach team. So I'm, coordinating with Aster and Randy to, get messaging to the folks that are living out in your districts, as well as try to get them connected with any services if that's what they want to do.
All right, and I'll get started. So next slide, please. So I'm going to go over the program purpose and the background. Michael's going to give a brief overview of Cascadia. Randy's going to talk about some of our crew safety challenges. I'll go over where we've been focusing our work throughout the drainage districts and what our overall response has been. And then I'll also talk about program successes and challenges. Michael will talk a little bit about Cascadia's successes in doing outreach out in the field. And I'll touch on program spending in Pen 1. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this program is threefold. First is to provide education and supportive housing services to individuals living outside within the drainage district service area, with a focus on those camped on or around critical flood safety infrastructure. And this is primarily done through our partnership, our contract with Cascadia. And second, to clean up illegal dumping on and around flood safety infrastructure. This is done through our contract with Rapid Response BioClean, as well as in collaboration with other agencies and nonprofits. And really these first two goals build to what is our ultimate goal of this program, which is improving safety and efficiency in field operations for MCDD staff so they can continue doing their work and ensuring that they have access to infrastructure. And as you'll hear in this presentation, while our partnership with Cascadia has been critical in connecting to services, we've had to implement additional safety and security measures over the past 9 months or so to help meet this goal. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the program background. This started as a 6-month pilot project in 2018 with Cascadia Behavioral Health. And thanks to the board's support, turned into an ongoing program that received the 2019 Special District Association of Oregon Award for an outstanding special district program. I think our approach is pretty unique in public sector agencies. We have a service first oriented approach rather than going straight to enforcement. Since 2020, the drainage districts have experienced a higher concentration of houseless activity, as I'm sure we're all aware. And our response to that activity has expanded due to additional safety concerns, which, as Jim mentioned, are not necessarily related to houseless activity. There's also an increase of criminal activity within the drainage districts. And the boards adopted a resolution this past fall, which has given us authority to manage houseless activity across the flood safety system, regardless of jurisdiction, to ensure public safety. And with that, I will pass it off to Michael, who will give an overview of Cascadia. Next slide, please.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to me talk. So Cascadia is, as it says here, we are a community health agency providing mental health, addiction services, gambling services, all kinds of just social services and primary care throughout Portland and Multnomah County. We have a few health clinics as well as some residential sites for people with severe and persistent mental illness. Specifically the street outreach team and the homeless division. Our team provides mental health care on a street level as well as street level outreach to try to get people connected with services either through our agency or the other various avenues that they can go throughout Portland and Multnomah County. We also we have funding to help get people into housing on like a community level, and then help people navigating social systems to try to connect with long-term subsidies, as well as just other types of care that they may need. So it's good to have us out there talking to some of the folks that are, either in mental health crisis or have sort of fallen through the cracks due to mental health reasons, to try to get folks connected with support services and safety net services, and you know, try to get them back on their feet, back to being functional members of society.
Great, and I think next slide is Randy to touch on some of the safety challenges.
Yeah. Well, it's been a hell of a ride. So the last couple of years, I mean, we had the Houseless stuff for quite a few years now, but the last couple of years have been quite challenging. And I think one of the biggest things, the first bullet, is mental fatigue and exhaustion. I think on and off, myself and my crew have been pretty beaten down and pretty mentally exhausted. And that's just that constant exposure to camps on 33rd, 142nd, Pump Station 4, and just the random locations that we visit every day. It's kind of crazy what's been normalized, but it's still out there, and it's still people have, you know, their tougher days. So that's been one of the biggest thing that transitions into just, you know, being present. And when doing work, there's, you know, depending on what kind of day or what you've been exposed to, that can be pretty distracting and hard to stay focused, along with just not really knowing what you're walking into or what situations you could be around, depending on the day or where you're going. So there's a lot of little mental prep, definitely, when going up to Pump Station 4. We have armed guards, and there's a lot of stories from all different locations throughout the districts that are not ideal, but we're managing it and trying to get the things in place to get our work done safely. Another big one, and I'm sure you might have seen this photo before, but I was just at the cross levee today. This is what it looks like, and the guys working in the slough, raking grates, anywhere and everywhere we're getting material, different stuff. There's needles, there's unidentified trash and different things, and there's a lot of exposure. We try to implement, you know, best practices and stuff like that, but you know, we can't 100% eliminate this. And these sites change every day, every different culvert, people dump stuff or whatever, needles, trash, human waste, depends on the location. There's definitely a bit of disruption to our, you know, our projects and our annual maintenance. As you can see, if you drive Marine Drive or in different sections, I mean, there's certain areas we have to skip certain things, or it's on hold. Projects being completed, repair projects. There's a lot that goes into that, with coordination with other agencies and prioritization in the city. So major disruptions. And one of the biggest things on this bullet is talking about mowing operations and people sleeping in the tall grass. And this is another thing that's been mentally really challenging, and a lot of weight on the guys, the two guys that are mainly out mowing for 4 months straight. We had a couple of near misses in the last couple of years. People are just incapacitated in 6 foot tall grass, and we've got protocols, but you can only see so much. And so it's kind of, we've got infrared cameras on top of our tractors and different things that are tools, but doesn't eliminate the issue. And even if you walk a whole site and drive a site, there's still these hazards out there. And I think it's definitely weighs on the guys, that's for sure. And the slough work, I'm doing a lot of work lately. But there's locations in there around some of these hidden camps around the sloughs and stuff that you're really exposed in. And there's, you know, you never know what kind of individual you're going to come across. And there's certain sections we just don't go in right now. The crew just really doesn't feel safe, and the exposure seems a little too great for what we're trying to do. So it's, there's all kinds of challenges. And I do want to say we're making progress, though. I think we have a lot more tools and resources than we did. And this is something that we couldn't really foresee, I guess. And I think we're, you know, improving and continue to grow and then trending in the right direction for trying to get our work done. But to say it's been a challenge is an understatement. And for a lot of these reasons and for others, but I'm really proud of our crew, the operations team, and the people that support us. They do an amazing job, and from the top down, we've got a lot of support. So I think that's about it on the safety challenges. More than willing at the end to answer some questions or anything, but Pen 1 specifically, there is activity and stuff, and luckily we haven't seen major formations of camps, but it's a thoroughfare on that PIR levee and stuff, and we've had some weird interactions, but luckily there's not a lot of major formations of camps that bring a lot of issues that we see. So that's what I got. Thank you.
Yeah, if there's no questions for Randy at this time, we can move on to the next slide. All right, why don't we keep going? So yeah, as Randy mentioned, not a lot of large camps in Pen 1. These dots are kind of the hot spots of where we've done outreach and illegal dumping cleanup. In Pen 1, we did hear from the port that there were individuals camped in Vanport wetlands, which floods seasonally. So we wanted to make sure that they were safe. And so we did some outreach to them. And we also, there's been some campers near I-5 that Cascadia has done continual outreach to as well. About 30 hours of outreach in Pen 1. In Pen 2, we've done outreach repeatedly at the Schmier Road pump station and a couple illegal dumping cleanup activities there as well. And all along that Schmier Road levee, there's been outreach at Delta Park. And there was also a camp near the Bridgeton Slough at Northeast 2nd and Marine Drive that we posted and cleaned up as well. Next slide, please. The majority of the work has been in MCDD. We've done a lot of houseless outreach and cleanup activity at Pump Station 4 to gain access to that pump station, which I'll talk about a little more. We've done some outreach and cleanup work at 142nd Avenue, and I know that the city of Portland does plan to do a more comprehensive cleanup of that area when they have the capacity to do so. We've done a lot of work with the port along Marine Drive east of I-205, and I'll talk more about that later. And we've also worked with the port and Rapid Response and Cascadia to clear out some buffer zones so that we can access our culverts along Northeast 33rd in accordance with our IGA with the port to help keep drainage flowing from the airport. Next slide, please. And then in SDIC, even less outreach in problematic areas here, but there has been some activity along Sundial Road and in Sundial Wetlands and along Marine Drive. Next slide. So just to talk a little bit more about what our comprehensive approach has been. It's been more robust than in previous years. Of course, we're still working with Cascadia. As I mentioned, we have a service first approach when engaging the houseless community to avoid, when possible, trauma-related experiences associated with local law enforcement. However, we will utilize law enforcement as it's available in areas where long-term camping has either resulted in potential safety risks if there's criminal activity near there, or extended operational delays. And we've also placed ecology blocks in key locations where we need to limit cars and camping access so that our crew can have that physical access to infrastructure. Pump Station 4 is a good example of where we've done that. And as we've been mentioning, we've implemented additional safety and security measures like armed security and ballistic vests so that our crew can be safe and feel as safe as possible when working in high-risk areas such as Pump Station 4. and mentioned illegal dumping cleanup a few times. We'll talk more about that later. We're also implementing signage and installing signage. This is an example of what that looks like. And really the goal is to communicate to not just houseless individuals, but also everyone what our expectations are and how people engage with flood safety infrastructure. We've installed these signs in Pen 1 and near Schmear Road Pump Station, and you can expect to see these signs throughout the districts in the coming year or so. And then last but not least, thanks to Jim Middaw's involvement in this program and his leadership and connections, we've been able to leverage a substantial amount of resources and support from other agencies in order to post and clean up illegal dumping, which has been really helpful. Next slide. Actually, I think now I'm passing it off to Michael. We'll both talk about some successes and outcomes from this program, and we'll start with the work that Cascadia has done.
Hi again. Yeah, so as you can see, like it's just good for us to be a ongoing presence out in the slough in the various districts. I know this is the Pen 1 district, which there is some activity, but it is lesser than places like MCDD or Pen 2. You know, we did go into the Vanport wetlands to make sure that the people that were sighted camping there had gotten out before it floods, as well as some of the campers along I-5 and Interstate Avenue. But yeah, I mean, what we try to do is anytime we go out, we try to, you know, connect with as many people as we can, try to get them some education and information about the fact that they are staying on a, you know, man-made flood management system, because it does seem like a lot of folks that are out, you know, camping in tents or RVs are not aware that the land they're camping on is actually part of very important citywide infrastructure, and providing that kind of education that, like, hey, don't dig, don't pull out the riprap, like all that stuff, I think helps at least lessen the amount of damage or impact that campers are having on that infrastructure. And I mean, in addition to that, then just sort of the more compassionate side of giving these folks that are out there an opportunity to connect with support services if they want to. And, you know, to be frank, not everyone wants to, but those that do want that at least have the opportunity to connect with us and work with us on either just trying to get into a shelter, which we've had some good successes getting people connected with shelters when they're interested in that, connecting directly with our program to work on mental health and getting into housing. One recent like anecdotal success is, you all may have been familiar with the structure that was on Marine Drive near I-205. There were like some news stories about it. It was getting a lot of attention. With our outreach and like just building rapport with the guys who built that structure and were staying there, we were able to get them to sort of move voluntarily. And now one of the guys that was staying there just got approved for a affordable housing unit, and I'm working on filling out an application for a permanent housing subsidy. So, you know, there are successes out there. I do feel for Randy, the struggle is real, because not everyone is super interested in connecting with us. And I think the coordination this week with the Port of Portland with sort of moving people away from Marine Drive has been a motivator for some people to connect with our services and work with us in a little more of an intensive way to actually try to get out of the situation they're in and into a more stable housing situation. I saw some hands raising, so I wanted to acknowledge those. If people have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Michael, I was just clapping for your success. That was a clap. I don't.
Yeah, I was also clapping.
Oh, good. Yeah, they need more clap emojis.
But if anyone has any questions for Michael, feel free to ask them.
I thought about the cowbell, but it seemed a little inappropriate.
I would, this is Randy. I would just say, I was talking about the the tough stuff. But we do have an awesome relationship with Michael and Chris and that team, and really appreciate Michael. And it's been a few years now. We've built an awesome relationship, and they are doing really good work. So I just want to call that out.
Hey, thanks, Randy. Back at you, bud.
All right, we can move on to the next slide. So another key success for us is that Pump Station 4 is now operational. You may remember that there was flooding along Fairview Lake during Veterans Day weekend. And after that happened, a lot of agencies and nonprofits and private businesses came together to help us get access to our pump station. And now we do have access. And here's a picture of our crew at Pump Station 4 during a high rain event in January, and they were able to keep the pumps going that entire time, which is what we want to see. There's still some criminal activity at this location, and next steps here is, I know that the city of Portland, who owns the majority of the Big Four Corners area, is planning on doing a more comprehensive cleanup and relocation of this entire area starting sometime this spring. And I know that Randy and Bill are working with staff at the city of Portland to create a security plan, because this area is so large and a little porous. So we're hoping that that those efforts will ultimately reduce some of the violent activity that our crew has experienced, which has included gunshots. Next slide. So mentioned illegal dumping cleanup. We've had about 5 cleanup efforts through our contract with Rapid Response BioClean, mostly in Pen 2 and MCDD, and they've picked up 25.7 tons of trash throughout the drainage districts, which is awesome. We've also partnered with Solve. It's a nonprofit. They host volunteer trash pickup events. We've had 4 events throughout the districts, and Pen 2 and MCDD, which are our higher activity areas. We've leveraged the work of 123 volunteers to pick up over 21,000 pounds of trash. And we hope to continue working with Solve wherever it makes sense. Next slide. We're also working with the port to clean up Marine Drive and relocate the camps along Marine Drive. This is, one of our most important pieces of infrastructure, as we all know. So we want to make sure that we have access to the Marine Drive levee for operations and for emergency response. We've done some work on I-205. That area is a lot more clear than it has been. And we are currently doing some work to remove debris and secure the area just east of 138th on the riverward side of the levee along the Marine Drive bike path there. And there's plans that I think someone mentioned that the port has plans to post the 122nd area in the next couple weeks. So hopefully we'll clear that area out soon. And I know Randy and his crew have built a huge gate for that access road there that they'll install once that area is clear. And I wanted to just call attention to this really awesome event, Solve event we had. That's I-205 in the background. In that day alone, there were about 50 volunteers. It was a really beautiful sunny day, and we picked up 8 tons of trash in just a few hours. So that was definitely one of our most impactful events. And next slide. So some challenges. Oftentimes when we need to relocate a larger camp, it is helpful to have law enforcement support. But as we all know, we don't have law enforcement on staff. So we rely on City of Portland, Port of Portland to help us out with that, and they have limited capacity. And there's this public misconception that we do have that enforcement capability. So that's a constant communication challenge. And there's also the life loss safety concerns that Randy mentioned. I know Randy and his crew are gonna do some emergency first response training so that they can, if someone does get injured out in the field, the crew will have skills to be able to respond to that. There is some superficial levee damage along Marine Drive that needs to be assessed once all of the debris and campers are removed. And unfortunately, right now, there are limited relocation options if the people that we're interacting with are not interested in the services that Cascadia is providing. Next slide. So I wanted to briefly mention what the spending has been this fiscal year. It's been a little over 6,000. That has included 2,700 for Cascadia's outreach, and a little bit of going to MCDD personnel for administrative costs, about 36,000, and then just a few dollars for purchasing a graphic for our signage. And I think, next slide, I think that concludes our presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Just a quick shout out to the team who's been really doing a lot of hard work, and to our partners like Michael. And Aster joined us not very long ago, and since they started, we've really seen a big uptick in our ability to partner. So thank you, Aster. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Randy, and operations for all the hard work you're doing to try and be compassionate and still keep people dry.
Any questions or comments from the board? I'll just say, Michael, thank you for the work you do. It's so important, and I imagine very difficult. Randy, thank you for continuing to persist with this side of our work, that we don't get as many high fives for operations as we do for levy recertification. And I just appreciate the deep dive into this today, and I appreciate your describing the work you do and its challenges. And Aster, thanks for bringing this presentation to us. I think I'll state the obvious, which is this is a generational issue, is dealing with houselessness and the lack of social services. I appreciate the long-term relationships that we're building, and I just hope we can continue to do that and be part of a solution that's positive and human focused. So again, thank you very much.
Yeah, and just echoing that, really thank you to the whole team for all the work and on all the different angles. You know, Randy, as you were talking, it just, you know, sounds like so much what I hear from our team here at Parks as well. You know, and we know, sort of recognize all the challenges that we're facing, trying to manage a lot of you know, a lot of conflicting uses in our property, and trying to do that in a compassionate way. So, but yeah, just really want to acknowledge the impacts to staff, because it's a big thing. So appreciate all the work that everybody's doing to, as James said, work through. It's really a generational issue. It's a, you know, it's a big deal. So thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for having us.
Okay, so we'll turn it over to Jim for the executive director report.
Okay, I remember to unmute. That's pretty good. I don't have a lot to say. I was going to talk about Houseless, but obviously you just learned a lot. So thanks to that team. A couple of quick things. We are beginning next year's assessment process. So we met this morning to go over the procedure and the QA QC that goes into both establishing our cost drivers and the revenues that we need, and then the formulas that we go through to come up with a number for each landowner and get that information to the county. So again, we're already started on a year from now's budget and getting the revenues that you all need. Second, I want to thank Evan Mitchell. She's been the driving force in getting us some public opinion research going. We have a draft poll now, and we'll probably be a couple more iterations, but we hope in the next couple of months to have some really good quantitative data for you about the transition to a new district and how we can pay for that and where the public stands on that. I also want to share that you all adopted a ordinance or a resolution consistent with the MCDD equity policy. As you may know, the MCDD equity policy calls on staff to develop a equity action plan at the department level and also an agency-wide plan. And the way we are going to implement that policy, or I'm sharing with you that my request that we implement it this way, is that we are developing an equity framework that provides a baseline and some guidance on how to develop an action plan. We are establishing that framework under the rubric of the urban district for a couple of reasons. The first is that the time, we hope, is relatively short for the legacy districts, and also the urban district has broader authorities in the equity space. And so we will be developing that with the urban board and also taking what we learned from that effort and applying it where we can under the MCDD rubric and under the legacy district's authorities. If you have questions or concerns about that, please let me know. And then the last thing I want to let you know is that we are doing a lot of hiring. We're not adding staff, but we are moving some things around and replacing some people who have departed. So in updates, we will be posting a director of finance and administration position relatively soon. That is the position that Keith is in an interim role in. We're really excited about it. And we have Mary Rowe as an outside consultant who's going to help us, we hope, generate a really diverse and exciting pool for that position. We're also soon to post an assistant finance manager position. That is intended to really help bolster all of the great work of our finance team and Janet, who isn't here today, but we have a big workload coming up with dissolution and making sure that all the assets and liabilities are divvied up appropriately. Also in starting up the new revenue model for the urban. So we're going to fill that position to provide more support. We're in the final throes of interviewing a replacement for Brian Eberhardt. That is sort of half emergency management, half project management. And Bill and Colin are deep into evaluating candidates with some of their colleagues. Emily and Wendy are getting close to having some recommendations on a new office manager who's backfilling for Emily, who's transitioned over to really trying to project manage our transition. And Randy has recently started a new operations team member called Jason Shower, and really excited to have him on board. And I had a really fun opportunity. I want to end on a high note that last Tuesday was Jason's first day, and I happened to be leaving the office when he was walking out of the shop, and I didn't recognize him. So I said, "You must be the new guy." And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, how was the first day?" And he stopped and he looked around and he said, "Look at this place. We have backhoes and dump trucks and boats and welders, and it's so awesome. I get to tinker on so many things, and I'm outside, and it's just a great place to be. I'm super excited to be here." So great job, Randy. And we're excited to have another operations team member to really help make sure the water keeps moving. And I think with that, we're really optimistic on the Business Oregon grants. We're very excited, again, thanks to the work of Evan Mitchell and Colin and their team, that we were included in the president's budget. Our project was for the core part of the funding of the pre-construction engineering and design costs, which was unexpected and very positive news. And so with that, I think I'm going to stop talking and free you maybe 30 seconds early, unless you have any questions for me.
Well, do we have any new business? Thank you. By the way, thank you, Jim, as always. Any new business? Okay, well, we will end on time. Thank you again to all the presenters. Thank you to the staff. Thank you to the board. Great to see you folks. Have a wonderful day.
Appreciate all your help, board members.
Thank you.